Hey everyone and welcome back. For today's video, I thought that I'd talk about a few little habits that I've learned to kind of create for myself as a self-employed person over the years. And I feel like I haven't really done a video like this before where I've actually talked about some of the things that I think really help me as a self-employed person and have done so for the last 7 years or so that I have been freelancing. And as some of you may already know, being a self-employed person can be a really difficult thing at times. Now, for those of you who are new here, my name is Kaylee and I'm a beauty and fashion photographer, but I'm also a content creator and I started this channel a few years ago to talk about all things business, social media, freelancing, and content creation. And as I mentioned, being a self-employed person can be a really difficult thing at times. It is not something that comes naturally to everyone. And unfortunately, it is one of those career path things where it's not like you're ever really told how to be a self-employed person or how to run a business for yourself. So there really are so many aspects to it that I feel that I've had to learn along the way. And even with schedules and routines and things like that, I feel like it's very individualized as to what actually works for who. And you tend to go through a bit of a learning process yourself with this and experimentation process to try and find what works in your day-to-day working life. But overall, it can be really difficult because there's not really anyone to just kind of like go and ask questions to, unless you get yourself a business mentor or something like that. But it's really hard. There's no clear-cut path to being a self-employed person, what the general rules are, etc., etc. And as a self-employed person as well, you basically have to be everything for your business. Quite often you have to be the accountant, you'll need to be the marketer, you'll need to be a designer at times. There are so many roles that really you don't expect to have to do, I guess, as a self-employed person when you're first going into starting your own business. And these are all things that you really can pick up skills with along the way. But essentially today I thought I'd focus on the habits in particular that I've tried to form, or the routines that I've tried to form with being self-employed over the years that I think has really, really helped me out. And especially if you are someone that struggles with a bit of motivation or struggles to know where to get started on a day-to-day basis. Maybe you have a little bit of habits with procrastination, which, I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. We all need to procrastinate sometimes. It's just a human nature thing. But I do think that there's certain things that I've learned and experimented with over the years that's really helped keep me at least on track with my work on a day-to-day basis. And hopefully some of these tips may help you out today. But without further rambling, let's get started and let's talk about some of these habits that I've formed as a self-employed person over the years. So the first thing that I've really focused on, especially in the last couple of years when I've found it very hard to try and get started in the day, sometimes you just wake up and it's very, very hard for someone that doesn't have a boss kind of standing over their shoulder telling them what to do. Maybe you don't have a schedule. Maybe you don't have like a really structured work day. This is where I find that creating this kind of habit really helps. And that is to try and create momentum. Now, I think momentum is something that is really, really underrated when it comes to getting any work done. And this could be, like whether you're working for someone else, whether you're working for yourself, whatever kind of role you're in, or if you're doing social media or being a content creator as well on the side, I think momentum just plays such a huge part in actually your success and whether you're keeping on track with things. Now, I'm not going to lie and say that this is easy to create momentum, but I do have a couple of little tips centered around this that I think really help me on a daily basis. If I'm struggling to get started, if I know that I'm specifically procrastinating things for no particular reason other than the fact that I'm just like, I can't be bothered to do it. And sometimes I do this with filming quite a bit, to be honest, because filming I find takes up the most energy in a day. But there are a couple of little things that you can do to kind of kickstart yourself. So the first part of this and the really basic part of this is to write a daily to-do list. I have to have one of these because if I don't, then I don't know what's happening in my week. I don't know what's happening in my days. And I know that I will easily miss things if I do not write them down. So creating a to-do list is a really, really great start for this. But the actioning of the to-do list is where I think a lot of people struggle most. And this is where I really want to focus with these tips. And my tip for this is to really start small if you have to. So again, if you're struggling to really get started on some of your tasks for the day, maybe you're looking at your to-do list and you're just like, I don't really want to do any of this, or I'm just going to struggle today, or I want to do other things, like I want to procrastinate, I want to basically do anything but this, and we all have days like that. But sometimes it can become more of a habitual kind of thing, just waking up and not really knowing where to start with things. So one thing I would say is to start small. If you have any smaller tasks on your to-do list for the day, try and knock them out of the way first, because quite often they will be easier to knock out of the way. And then you can already kind of feel some sense of accomplishment. It might be small, but at least you've already done something in the day. And to be perfectly honest with you, this doesn't always have to be work related. Now, I'm not saying to go and procrastinate and just find another task to do that's completely different, but there are other things that you can kind of do to help start off with a bit of a productive day or morning. And I would say that some of those things kind of can revolve around sort of household chores if you have to do them anyway. For example, like maybe cleaning out the dishwasher first thing in the morning. Maybe it's making your bed if that's what you want to do. Maybe it is just giving the kitchen a quick clean, or the lounge room, or picking up things off the floor. Maybe there's just a couple of little things that you can do first off in your day to help you feel that sense of accomplishment. I've found that starting small and doing some of those smaller tasks, whether it's work related or house related, has really helped me to, I guess, get a little bit more clarity for the day, but also feel like I've already accomplished something for the day. And I think that's a very underrated thing. Feeling that accomplishment so early on in the day can really spur you on to do more and to want to do more in the day and get more completed. And this is really where momentum comes in, and I think a lot of people undervalue it. As I said, this can be applied to so many different things, and especially even if you're a content creator, maybe you're starting a content creation business on the side and you're really struggling to get things done for that, alongside maybe other work commitments that you may have. You may already have a 9-to-5 job. This is where those kinds of things can help too. Setting yourself those smaller tasks and getting them out of the way first. So even if it means, for example, if you need to create a couple of short form videos, maybe before you edit a YouTube video, or maybe you need to edit a thumbnail, or maybe you need to reply to comments. You know, there's lots of different little tasks that you can set yourself to just do initially. Maybe it's email related. You know, there's just so many different things as a self-employed person that you can be working on in terms of smaller tasks to kind of help you build that momentum throughout the day. Now, for me in particular, I find that doing this kind of thing works earlier in the day. I find that the earlier, the better. That's personally just me though, and I know that that's really the better hours that I work between, is just those earlier hours in the day. I'm not much for the afternoon. I tend to become pretty useless when it gets to like mid-afternoon. I get very, very tired, and I get very, very unmotivated at that point in the day. I just feel that I tend to work better in the mornings, and I'm actually going to talk about this in my next point. It's going to be a pretty important point, but this is usually when I find the momentum kind of kickstart really works well for me, because if I kind of wake up in the morning and if I'm already doing a couple of things, then that really spurs me on to do even more throughout my day and get through that to-do list as well. Now, the next point, and I've already made reference to this, but the next point is to find your most productive hours in a day. Now, I've always found that this can really come down to your own sleep cycle and what kind of hours you prefer to go to bed and wake up. And this can really vary from person to person. I've spoken about this book before on my channel, but Bear, Lion or Wolf is a book that I read, I think sometime earlier last year, or maybe 2023 now. But I found that really resonated with me in terms of trying to find my most productive hours in a day. I think that I'd always really struggled with if I was waking up later, which I never really liked doing. I think there was always like a part of me that didn't like waking up later. And then I'd feel quite sluggish, and I'd find that my momentum really was lost for a lot of the day. But this is not true for everyone, and a lot of people out there really prefer to be a bit of a night owl. And I guess in this book, you're kind of categorized a little bit. As the book title says, it's Bear, Lion or Wolf. And this is very much based on your own specific sleep cycles. So if you're a lion, you tend to wake up earlier and go to bed earlier. If you're a wolf, you tend to get up later and then go to bed a lot later as well. Like I said, bit of a night owl. And then with a bear, you're pretty much somewhere in between. So you'd pretty much be preferring to get up like with around that 9-to-5 kind of working hours time frame. Now, I do think that I sit somewhere between a lion and a bear, and I really do prefer to get up earlier in the day. I feel that I work a lot more productively within those hours, and then that allows me to kind of wind down a little bit in the afternoon and then go to bed a little bit earlier as well. Now, these sleep cycles can also change, and it actually does mention this in the book, and as a teenager, you'll quite often find yourself being a wolf. And quite often teenagers are hardwired to stay up later, to be a lot more alert and most creative at night. And for a lot of people, they stay this way into adulthood. It's just depending on your own individual characteristics with this and really what works best for you. But finding your most productive hours will really help with all different habits that you'll start to set yourself as a self-employed person or just working for yourself. I just really think that knowing those time frames and knowing when you're going to be at your best has to be so prioritized as someone who's working for themselves, because you don't want to get into the wrong routine of being in the wrong kind of hours. And for me, like for example, if I was to start waking up a lot later and just working in the evening hours or the late afternoon hours. And this has happened before actually, because I tend to match my hours to my partner's schedule, because his schedule can change every few months. And he has had shifts where he's been working later and finishing later. And I really just noticed the difference in myself and what I get done in the day, and it's not great. So I really don't like that. I really don't like those kinds of hours for me. But as I said, it is very individual and everyone is different. So I think it's really important to find out what hours are going to be best for you. Now I'm going to talk about the third habit. And I think this is something that's definitely rung true for me ever since I've started, probably in my working life, but absolutely since I've started as a freelancer. I think that there is no way around this, and it is to use a calendar for reminders, but basically for everything. As I've said, as a self-employed person, you quite often have to do so many different roles in your business, and it is very hard to remember what is happening at what time. And you may have so many different tasks going on in a week. And for me, it was always definitely that way, especially when I started out freelancing, being a photographer, having to be in contact with so many different teams of people was really difficult to keep track of week to week. So I always had to be logging in my days on my digital calendar on my phone. It's basically part of my life now. Like, this calendar really does have everything in it. I have to set reminders for myself. Otherwise, I know that I'll forget about things. Like, it's just me. It's just my brain. There are people out there that are really good with memory, really good with remembering dates, times, faces, names. I am terrible with this. So for me personally, I've found that using a calendar for everything, business related or not, is the way to go, because it allows me to stay on top of things. And it is a habit that I've now gotten into setting. So now every time that I do have something on, or a call or a task or whatever it is on a certain day, I set a reminder as well. I feel like that's the most important thing. Set that reminder, because then at least you can try to keep yourself accountable and it's not just going to fall by the wayside, whatever the task is. Now, this is actually not just a digital thing for me, and I've spoken about this before on my channel, but I use so many different types of planners. I use my to-do lists, which I've already mentioned in this video. I use a weekly to-do list. I use calendar planners and content planners, and I just use planners for everything. I have a yearly planner as well. Like, I can never have enough, because honestly, the more that I write things down, the more that I see them on paper, the more that I am likely to remember them as well. So I just find that it's great to have lots of different planners, and especially on my desk, writing them down as well as putting them into my phone, because sometimes with digital, it can be hard and you do tend to forget about things until you get that reminder. So I like to have things very visual in front of my face at all times if I can. Now, the next habit is a really important one for self-employed people, but it is to really become on top of your finances with your business. And I've found for me, this is really primarily so tax time is not a nightmare. I can tell you the first few years that I was self-employed and freelancing, the way I kept on top of my finances was not good. It was very manual. It was all kind of written down, and it was just very messy. I remember taking it to my accountant that year, and they were actually a new accountant too, so I'd been seeing them for the first time. And I mean, they were fine, they were great with it, but like, everything was just really difficult to keep track of. And I think too, like, I probably missed out on claiming for things because I didn't keep things organized in terms of my receipts or my expenses. And again, this was not all digitally done. It was all kind of manually written down, which I think in this day and age, there are lots of ways to avoid this. Some people may prefer to do it this way, and it's totally fine. Again, individual, like, you do you. But for me, I think getting onto accounting software was a really, really big help, because it really just accounted for everything, every cent that was spent and every cent that was earned. Not to mention too, the other things that do come along with being on top of your finances for your business. And And here in Australia, we have a process called PAYG and BAS. So PAYG is like a pay-as-you-go system for tax, which gets generated every year. I believe it's always based on your previous year's earnings. And then so generally you would pay quarterly an amount to the tax office. And then not only that, with a BAS statement, this is more to do with your GST earnings. And this is a tax that Australians have to pay on goods and services. So you need to make sure that you're charging GST if you earn above a certain threshold. So being on top of your taxes and your GST payments, also really, really important because you don't want to get in trouble with the tax office. Obviously, this is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor at all or an accountant, but again, as a self-employed person, this is something I've had to deal with for many years now, and it is something that I want to make sure I'm never behind with, especially with taxes, because there is nothing worse at tax time than getting a really, really big tax bill because you haven't put enough tax aside. And there are literally thousands upon thousands of people every year that do make this mistake and don't put enough tax aside. And then you'll end up paying a tax bill off for like potentially a year or 2 years afterwards. Like sometimes they can be that big. So I really just recommend from the start, even if you need to speak to someone like a professional, a financial advisor, an accountant, really good idea to do that, especially if you're starting with your business and you want to make sure that you're keeping track of things accurately. Ask them for recommendations, for certain things like accounting software even, and really just make sure that you're on top of that. Also with the accounting software comes invoice tracking. Now this is going to be really important for you if you're sending out invoices for your services or goods or whatever it is. So make sure that you've got somewhere you can generate invoices too, because they're really good to have at tax time, and making sure that you've kind of got all of them filed somewhere as well. It's going to make everything feel and look a lot more legitimate too. And then my last habit that I've really focused on again in the last couple of years is to take breaks and get outside. Being self-employed and particularly working from home. Now, this is not always going to be the case if you're self-employed. You may have a business where you're out of the house quite a lot during the week. But even if you are, or you are at home the majority of the week, like for me these days I tend to be, I think it's really important for not only your mental health, but just in general for your productivity to actually take those breaks that you need to take and to get outside and have a change of scenery, because there is nothing worse when you've been working months on end at home and you are just like feeling stir crazy. Like you just need to get out of the house, and even just doing a daily walk and getting outside or going for a coffee or just really simple things like that can make such a difference in your day and really clear your head and just get you a little bit more in a relaxed state too. I think it's good on so many levels. Like I don't think you need to be a doctor to know that going for a walk and getting outside is good for your mental health and good for your health in general. But it is especially important, I think, as someone who is dealing with their own business. And sometimes, like I've already mentioned in this video, you are doing so many different roles. You don't want to have to be feeling so overwhelmed day to day with what you've got to do. And sometimes doing something as simple as just going for a walk and getting outside will really make all the difference in your day. As I said, it's something I've really focused on the last few years for myself, and I really highly recommend it because it does really lift my mood every time that I usually go for one. Well, thank you so much for watching this video today, and I hope you really enjoyed it. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, make sure you do, because I'll be posting a lot more videos like this one. Let me know down in the comment section below what your tips are for self-employed people or for content creators, freelancers, small business owners. Put all of your tips down in the comment section below, because I really think there's a lot of people out there who would love to hear them. And especially if you've got any particular habits that you feel work well for you, definitely feel free to share them in the comment section below. Also, make sure to hit the notification bell to see all the updates that I have coming up in future. But thank you so much as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.